Well, hello. Do you like when I do my deep voice like that? That's weird. I'm never going to do that again. I probably will, though. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. Part two. Part two is upon us. Part two is going to be a lot more aggravating and frustrating and a punch to the proverbial gut than part two was, than part one was. So I hope you're ready for that. This is really awful stuff. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just really, really bad stuff done by really, really bad people. So, what's important, though, when we do live streams like this and topics like this, I should say, is to try to think back on how we all got here. And when I say here, I don't necessarily mean like in front of me watching podcasters or live streams at night instead of your newscasts. I'm talking about static sound is popping. Well, let me hit these buttons over here. I don't know what they do, but any better? Is it 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 better yet? Have we fixed it? No. Static sounds good. No, so sound is fine. It stopped. Good. 55. It's fixed. Good. Better now. Sound is fine. Good. No static. Yes. 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 Fine. Yes. Good. Yes. It's fine. It's good. Okay. I think I get the point. All right. So, as I was saying, when we do a topic like tonight, it's important to remember how we got here. And again, I don't mean how we got here in front of me, although that was a great decision in your life too. I mean, how could we have allowed something like this to happen? And when I say that, I don't mean how did we allow the September 11th attacks to happen, because is there really much you could have done about that? I want to go back to way before the September 11th attacks and identify all the reasons that us as a society, as a citizen of the United States or anywhere internationally as well, it doesn't even have to be the United States, because in this case, many of the people who were involved with 9/11 were outside of the United States. And I'm not talking about the Muslim or Arab terrorists, because that was not a thing. We justified war in Iraq and Afghanistan to satisfy what Israel wanted, which was control of the Middle East at all times. By attacking Iraq, by attacking Afghanistan, and even today, by attacking Iran, the Middle East is controlled and run by Israel. So we're going to talk a lot more about Israel as the weeks go on. But for tonight, I want to focus on where we left off in part one, which was a few nights ago. And where we left off in part one was a very, very obvious slap in the face that hit you like a ton of bricks when you saw, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that there were no planes that actually struck the Twin Towers on September 11, 2001. Beyond the shadow of a doubt. And if you don't believe that, or you're having a hard time believing that, or that makes you shake your head or shrug your shoulders or look at me like I'm some wacko, go watch the live. Because without a doubt, in just the 7 or 8 short videos that I showed you, and I could show you 100 more, but in just those short 7 or 8 videos, we have now proven, just by those videos, that the planes weren't struck by towers. So then what happened? Because the towers aren't there. You could go to New York right now. They're not there. Dude, what, is this all magic? Like, what's going on then? If they weren't struck by planes, they fell. So how'd they fall? So now we're going to talk about that tonight. And we are very similarly going to prove, beyond the shadow of a doubt, how the towers fell. There's certain things that, if you were a group of controlling elite, the world's elite that control the world, there's certain things that you could keep.
Ready to show off your live gameplay? Start streaming with Rumble Studio.
It's easy, it's seamless.
You can now multi-stream up to 4K quality to all your favorite platforms,
including Twitch, YouTube.
Under wraps for a short period of time. But only for a short period of time. And even during your window that you have that you could keep things secret from the masses, even during that window, some people are going to expose the actual truth about what they are trying to hide. I did that way back in the early 2000s. I remember passing out DVDs to people, trying to spread what actually happened. There was a group called Pilots for 9/11 Truth. There was a similar group of firefighters. So the small groups existed back then, but the cognitive dissonance was so strong after this originally happened that it was very hard for any truth to come out. Not without it being shut down and shoved aside as a conspiracy theory. Their plan over time, though, was to have complete control over the population by now. Agenda 2020. Hillary Clinton was supposed to win that election in 2016. Donald Trump got so many votes that he overcame the fraud that happened. He beat the fraud. There were no computer algorithm where they could switch votes and, let's say, for every one Trump vote, the other candidate, whoever it may be, let's say Joe Biden, I don't know, just as an example, that candidate would get 1.00125 votes. And then for the second Trump vote that came in, Joe Biden would get 1.00618 votes. So the algorithm changed depending on how many votes Trump got. It was never exactly the same, because then you could go back and say, hey, well, there's an obvious fix. Every time Trump gets a vote, it's exactly 0.0125 votes for Biden. So you couldn't do that. It was a very complex, continual algorithm that took place in 2020. But that's besides the point. Let's get back to what I was saying. By 2016, Hillary Clinton was supposed to be in office. That would have been Hillary's first term. Hillary's second term would have come in an absolute landslide in 2020, and that's when we would have lost all of our freedom. We are talking massive censorship on the internet. Podcasts like this and live streams like this that you're listening to right now, forget about it. Speak out against your government, you're a terrorist. You will get arrested. Talk about any of the things that we talk about, from the JFK assassination to 9/11, Benghazi, or anything in between. You speak out about it, you are arrested. They would have put into law many different laws that would have restricted your ability to speak out against them. Now, they already manipulated the mainstream media. They already manipulated social media. They already manipulated Google searches, Yahoo searches, and the rest. But wait until they take away your freedom of speech. Then there is absolutely no chance that they could ever get caught with any of this stuff. And even going back to 2016, yeah, a lot of people in the 15 years since 9/11 had passed, a lot of people were already questioning the narrative around 9/11, but not enough. Now, with the age of social media, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. COVID. They knew they were going to steal the election in 2020 after what happened to Hillary, and they knew how they were going to do it too. They implemented the machines. The machine switched votes. The algorithm added votes to Joe Biden every time Trump got one, in a different denomination every time. Sometimes the algorithm didn't even give Joe Biden an advantage over Trump in this election. Sometimes Trump got one vote, and for every one Trump vote, whether it was the 1 millionth vote or 50,000th vote or whatever, whenever it hit that vote total for Trump, the algorithm would kick in and give Joe Biden 0.95 votes or 0.5 votes. But regardless of anything that Trump ever got in 2020, Joe Biden always got one to make up for that. And then how Joe Biden actually won the election, how Joe Biden actually won the election, all these quotations you got to use, it's nuts. How he actually won the election was that just adding up of all of that fraud. 80 million votes the men received. That's what they said. This guy couldn't walk, talk, speak, debate. No one knew what his policy was about, because really it wasn't about anything. So by 2020, they had already implemented what they wanted to implement in terms of election fraud. By 2024, you had absolutely no chance to win an election against the cabal ever again. They would have taken that same strategy that they were implementing since Obama's elections, and they would have put it in every election nationwide, not just the general election. They've been using fraud in various different elections across the United States for Congress and for governor and for even in some cases lower level county commissioner type stuff. And their plan was to roll that out everywhere so that the Senate and the House of Representatives would always be controlled by the cabal. And once you solidify that, it's the end. because any legislation will be passed. Any speaking out like we're doing tonight against the government will result in arrest and imprisonment. Ask Australia how they feel about losing their gun rights. That was coming next. Obama had already introduced the narrative of gun control with Sandy Hook and other mass shootings around the United States. Well, we got to get rid of guns. Look at all the people that are dying. That's how easy it was. And then all they got to do is get somebody to vote on it. But they didn't yet have the fraud in place to manufacture a vote. They needed enough votes in Congress in order to do that. They already had the presidency. So if anything came across Obama's desk, he would have signed it. But the stage was being set for the United States to lose our gun rights. I don't think anyone really knows how close we were to losing everything. So I get a little aggravated, and I've said this many times before. It's nothing new. I mean, I've been getting aggravated for years with my following sometimes, because I see people in Telegram and in the comments and in the live chats and in big, long rant emails saying, oh, when is everything going to happen? I'm so sick of this movie. It has to be over, blah, 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 blah. You have no idea how close you were to going in jail just for thinking a certain thought. Yet you're not in jail. You're sitting here listening to me telling you about how they almost got away with all this. This is real. This isn't like some wacko conspiracy theory from the internet or from some forum or from some blog. This is what they were doing. COVID was to implement their election fraud scheme worldwide, especially in the United States. But they needed the mail-in balloting, and they needed the rights to do what they wanted to do in order to get Trump out of office, because he was about to tear everything down. So, and it almost worked. And looking back now on September 11th, that was one of the most recent examples of a psychological attack on America and on the world, not just America. Look at what terrorists got away with in one of the world's most recognizable cities. That's how vulnerable we are. You need your government, because look at what they did. You need to rely on your government. That's the thought they needed. They wanted you scared. They wanted you not leaving your house. They didn't want you. They wanted you to hate. They wanted you to hate Muslims, Arabs. All the hate crimes that happened post 9/11 to innocent people. So now that we had a really good epilogue and intro right there, why don't you guys tell me where you're from, and then we'll hop right into seeing some stuff that I know you're probably excited to see right now, but as we start watching it, you may not be. Tell me where you're from. We'll do some shout outs and then we'll get going. Durham, North Carolina. Go Duke. Camia, Idaho. Okay. Boobies, Michigan. It's probably not a real place. Port Perry, Ontario. That one's always here. Same lady or man every time. Bullhead City, neighbor. Silver Springs, Maryland. Wow, we do have some Maryland people. Lyndhurst, New Jersey. Jersey. Texas, Denton. Denton, Texas? Because I didn't know Denton was okay. South.
At Rumble, we care about our creative partners. We care about our advertisers. There are millions of people out there who feel that they're sick of the legacy media.
Bogota. I know you don't talk like that, but Michigan. South Africa. Belize. Powderly, Texas. Ola, Arkansas. Shrinestown, Pennsylvania. That must be out west. Port Perry, Ontario. I said that already. Naples, Florida. Harrington, Delaware. Dresden, Maine. Stronghurst, Illinois. Cape Coral, Florida. Vermont. Sandy Hook, Connecticut. Talking about Sandy Hook already. Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. Washingtonville, New York. Rockledge, Florida. Dayton, Maine. Safety Harbor, Florida. Palestine, Texas. Memphis, Tennessee. Poland. Scotland. Belarus. That's probably Dima. All right. Part one of this series that I did 2 nights ago was shocking. I heard Brad Barton say that even though he's been in the 9/11 realm for many years and researching and uncovering the hidden truth behind all the lies, Brad never even saw some of the video that I shared the other night. And that's because a lot of it's very hard to find. You got to know where to look, even if it's on a public Facebook page or Instagram page or TikTok. A lot of times, you know, those social media conglomerates censor and shadow ban many of the accounts that are sharing this stuff. It certainly happened back around 2020 when all of our accounts got shut down, but still to a smaller extent, it happens today. So you got to know where to look. It's hard to find. And I found more video that I think a lot of you guys probably haven't seen. And we're going to connect some dots tonight that you probably have never seen connected. So we're going to start, excuse me. We're going to start with a very common video that I'm sure you have seen before, but we're going to take a look at it again because it's going to lead to the rest of what we're going to talk about tonight. So just to recap the end of part one, we talked about the towers not being struck by planes. We proved it, as I said earlier, beyond the shadow of a doubt. Even though the towers weren't struck by planes, they still had fallen. They are not there. So something made them fall. We saw enormous debris all over Lower Manhattan. We saw explosions. We saw fire. We saw people jumping. People are dead. So something happened that day. What was it? That's what tonight is going to cover. So let's listen to one of the worst people that you'll ever hear with your ears or see with your eyes. He is a controllable, manipulatable loser who honestly, because he's so dumb and naive, he allowed himself and his presidency to be controlled, not only by his father, but also by most of the other people around him, including Dick Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, Donald Rumsfeld, and many others. Brace yourself.
Pause to mark the 5th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The information that the Central Intelligence Agency has obtained by questioning men like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has provided valuable information and has helped disrupt terrorist plots, including strikes within the United States. For example, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed described the design of planned attacks on buildings inside the U.S. and how operatives were directed to carry them out. That is valuable information.
Advertisers. Expand your reach and elevate your campaign performance with untapped audiences.
For those of us who have the responsibility to protect the American people. He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping. He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping.
So let me make one thing clear here. George Bush was reading off of a script. It's very easy to see that. He's looking down at the paper that he's reading from. He didn't say it while he was ad-libbing. Like a lot of times Trump is reading from teleprompters, but Trump will stop and he'll go off on one of his little things. That's why his speeches and rallies are so long, because he's not just reading what's written. He's going off lib. He's going off of what he's thinking. That's not what Bush was doing right there. Bush was reading down on something on the paper. Now, he didn't read the word explosives. We're going to watch it again, and I want you to hear what I'm saying the next time you hear that. What he actually did was he was reading down at some sort of quote from some sort of Muhammad. Of course, they want to put Muhammad, Sheikh, whatever, because they want to drive that point home that it's a Muslim, it's an Arab, because they don't want you to like those people. So Bush is down reading this, and he sees the word explosions, but he reads explosives. That is his subconscious telling him that when he sees explosions, his mind changes the word to explosives. Why? because Bush knew about this entire day. None of this happens without the office of the presidency knowing about it. So he didn't do what a lot of people call a Freudian slip, which is he's talking, generally to someone in a conversational tone, and he slips and says something that he immediately regrets. No, he simply missed the word explosions and instead said the word explosives. Why? Because in the weeks and months leading up to 9/11, the word explosives was used regularly in briefings and in conversations with George Bush. So when his mind saw the word explosions, his mouth changed it to explosives because that is easier to come out of his mouth because that's a word that he says all the time. For example, if I was going to call somebody, if I was going to say the word handled to someone, I may instead say the word handsome. Why? Because I talk about myself like that all the time. It's because stupid. So let's watch it one more time. And knowing what I just said, watch how easy it is to mistake the word that's written on the paper that he's reading from. That word is explosions, but he says the word explosives. Watch.
Pause to mark the 5th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The information that the Central Intelligence Agency has obtained by questioning men like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has provided valuable information and has helped disrupt terrorist plots, including strikes within the United States. For example, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed described the design of planned attacks on buildings inside the U.S. and how operatives were directed to carry them out. That is valuable information for those of us who have the responsibility to protect the American people. He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping. He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping.
So I think you guys know this, but I am highly, highly, highly trained, more than anyone you will ever meet in your entire life, in body language. I have every ounce of body language training in my brain that anyone could ever absorb. Probably more than anyone could ever absorb. And what I notice after Bush says explosives instead of the word that's actually written on his paper, explosions, his body language starts to change completely. He's shifting around like this. He knows he just did it. He knows he said explosives. He knows he wasn't supposed to say explosives. He knows he was supposed to say explosions. But as soon as he says it, right afterwards, for the very first time, he starts shifting around leg to leg. You could tell he's going leg to leg. He's trying to get back into his mindset of lies that he was giving in the initial part of the speech, because now the lies that he was telling in the beginning, the truth was just spoken out of his mouth. So that makes your body uncomfortable. Chances are, if we had a heart rate monitor or a blood pressure monitor on George Bush at that time, you would have seen an enormous spike right after he said the word explosives. It was a misread, but it was a misread because his mind was trained on the word. He also, in addition to his body language completely changing, he also, for the first time in the speech, started stuttering and started repeating himself and started not as fluently reading the script that was in front of him. We'll watch it one more time, and I want you to notice that portion of it now too, because I know you guys have seen this video a lot, but you've never seen it like this. Watch it one more time after he says explosives instead of explosions, and watch how his entire demeanor changes in reading the rest of the script.
Pause to mark the 5th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The information that the Central Intelligence Agency has obtained by questioning men like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has provided valuable information and has helped disrupt terrorist plots, including strikes within the United States. For example, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed described the design of planned attacks on buildings inside the U.S. and how operatives were directed to carry them out. That is valuable information for those of us who have the responsibility to protect the American people. He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping.
Somebody said over here in the comments, the use of the word explosions does not make any sense in the context of the rest of the sentence, meaning that what I'm saying is wrong. Let me explain. The explosion of the planes. The planes would set off a large explosion due to, where you at, Terry? There she is. The planes would set off a large explosion. The jet fuel that are in the planes, that alone in the context of office buildings and the small quarters would set off an enormous explosion. So if a plane had flown into the building at the speed that it did, first of all, the plane wouldn't have gone through the building. That's what we prove. Echo. Any better now? No? How are you doing? Are we doing better in the audio here? Sound trouble, audio problems, echo, shadow, cutting, no, breaking, echo, echo. No, nope, Still choppy. Check your audio. Check it. Okay. I think we fixed it. Should be good now, right? All right. Please continue my show. Call Brad to fix it. It's hilarious, right? Static 2. Like, nope. Come on, give me still. Let's go. Choppy, cool. Down the lead for third show. That one. Still, let's go. I'm gonna have to do something drastic here.
On Rumble, stream 24/7 with your favorite live streams, viral videos, live pod.
Be better now. It's stupid. Come on. Don't make go buy any microphone, please. Any better? No. Worse. Bananas. Same. Not yet. Same. That go. Cough. Still happening. Where's Brad when you need him? This is so dumb. Up on now. Better. Any better now? No. This is so dumb. Hate this. Still bad. Wow, someone is literally like messing with me because this doesn't happen. This must not be on my end then. This is definitely the work of a no good rascal. Test. Test. Better now? Good? Cool. I don't know what I did. I didn't really do anything. All right, cool. All right, well, I'm not going to waste any more time. Thank you guys for helping me out there. So anyway, the one point that the person in the live chat was saying was that the word that I'm saying Bush was supposed to say doesn't make sense in the sentence, and it does, because there would have been an explosion on lower level floors of the building so that the people up above would not be able to escape, and that explosion would have been the plane. So Bush read the wrong word, basically. Now, Bush is alluding to explosions in the Twin Towers, and he's saying that he got that information from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the most Arab name that anybody could come up with, right? Might as well just throw all the regular Arab names into one name, so you just really emphasize that point home, you know? That's how stupid we were back then. And the reason why explosions are an important thing to hear come out of his mouth just 4 or 5 days after the attacks was because the buildings had to come down, right? They're not there. So how did they come down? We have very much evidence of exactly what was done that day. And it just has never been decimated to the people. Let's take a look at a short video. This one's about 3 minutes long. We're going to take a look at controlled demolitions.
Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. I guarantee you that it will have enormous.
Benjamin Netanyahu, Yeehaw, who cares how to pronounce his name? I talked about body language earlier. There is a natural cognitive reaction that your body makes when you're telling a statement that's a lie. This is another thing. People say human lie detector. Right. I actually consider myself a human lie detector. If I meet you and I've never met you before and we're having a serious business negotiation or a serious conversation about something which calls for you to lie to me, if I'm looking right at you, if you ever meet me in person and I'm looking right at you when you're telling me something, it means that I'm watching you for deception. It also means that I don't trust what you're saying. So I'm waiting for you to give me a clue that I'm right, because I don't know if I'm right. There's no way for me to know if I'm right or not. It's a gut feeling, and it's brought on by some of your movements, and also, of course, the content of what you're saying to me, which I either disagree with or in some cases I already know to be false. But I'm watching you, and if I am watching you with that look, and it's usually like when you're talking to me, I will literally just do this. I won't even blink. But there's tells. A lot of people talk about tells when you're at a poker table. I hardly lost in poker. I don't like gambling because I don't know. I feel like I'm taking advantage of people when I have to like use my abilities to take their money. I think I honestly think it's theft. But regardless, when Netanyahu is telling this statement in front of the masses that he's telling it to about how he guarantees that if Iraq and the regime is attacked, it will have enormous beneficial ramifications His little look down is something that he cannot even control. That's not something that, if he was telling himself in his mind as those words are coming out of his mouth to not look down, his mind would have looked down anyway. There's nothing you can do. It's a natural cognitive instinct. So what we have here is a very obvious controlled demolition, not only of both of the Twin Towers, but also and certainly Building 7. Now, Building 7 was a much smaller building. It was about 650 feet tall, I believe, 600 to 650 feet tall, whereas the Twin Towers were obviously much, much higher than that. But Building 7 had some very important people housed in it and organizations, including the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Defense, and the IRS. So there was really strong reason to get rid of Building 7, and they did. Building 7 we'll talk about a different time. But for now, if it was a controlled demolition, now we saw some controlled demolitions in that last video that were much, much, much smaller buildings. We are talking about enormous New York City skyscrapers. Enormous. It is incredibly hard to do a controlled demolition on buildings of that magnitude. Very hard. One of the reasons is because of the surroundings, but the main reason is because
On Rumble, stream 24/7 with your favorite live streams, viral videos, live pod.
Because of the capacity of the buildings. You're talking about steel, concrete, marble, all in a perfect column. It is very hard to do. Let's watch the next clip.
Pouring out of the South Tower just minutes before its collapse, molten metal by any standard. The official story tells us that this must be molten aluminum from the melted airplane. But molten aluminum looks like molten aluminum. It's silvery, does not glow bright orange and yellow in daylight conditions. Must be molten iron or molten steel. Who says this? As of 21 days after the attack, fires were still burning and molten steel was still running. This is attributed to Leslie Robertson, the structural engineer of the World Trade Center himself. And his associate, Richard Garlock, who says the debris past the columns was red hot, molten, running, saw pools of literally molten steel, says the lead contractor, the president of the company. And what do these gentlemen say?
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah, like lava.
Like lava from a
volcano.
Well, the problem with all of this is that the fires, and jet fuel for that matter, which is a hydrocarbon, burns only at about 12, maybe 1400 degrees under ideal fuel-air mixture ratios. Molten steel, molten iron, doesn't begin to even be produced until over 2700 degrees, more than twice that temperature. What could possibly account for these extreme hot temperatures? We'll be looking at thermite.
He said some really important things there about the melting point of steel, as well as the how hot jet fuel could actually burn. Because here's the thing, with a 747 aircraft slamming into such a large structure at such a great speed, most of that aircraft is going to completely crush. Think of it this way. A sewer, a manhole cover over a sewer, thick steel, about this thick, try to lift that thing up, you're like, oh! Let that be a miniature example of the Twin Towers. It's on the ground, supported by concrete, thick steel. Take a soda can. Theoretically, I know this isn't possible, but take a soda can, which is hollow aluminum, put some jet fuel in it. Now, theoretically, hypothetically, take that soda can at 400 or 500 miles an hour and shoot it into the manhole cover. Is that going to generate an impact so great that the soda can goes through the manhole cover? Is there enough jet fuel in that soda can so that when the impact happens and there's a spark, which there will be, metal hitting metal, will it generate such a blaze that it melts through the manhole cover? No. Why? Why not? Well, because as much as I hate to say there's science around these things, because science is just is all made up bullshit anyway. there are facts about what temperature something melts at. That there are facts about this stuff. Here's one of them. Jet fuel, typically Jet A or Jet A1, burns at temperatures ranging from 800 degrees to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit in open air, non-pressurized conditions, such as fire. Within pressurized, high-performance environment of a jet engine, combustion temperatures can exceed 2000. Degrees Fahrenheit or 3,632 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we're not talking about within a pressurized high performance jet engine. We're talking about an open air fire because the jet explosion, the explosion of the jet fuel that we saw on initial impact, that is an open air fire. In an uncontrolled fire, the temperature is generally around 800 to 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not hot enough to melt steel, which would have to occur above 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. But it is high enough to weaken steel structure, reducing its strength by over 50%. Okay, so we had these two planes crash into very high floors of the World Trade Center. Those impacts, if you quadrupled the amount of jet fuel and specifically poured it on the steel columns, it would ignite those steel columns and it would not melt, but weaken the structure. But even if that's the case, because the impacts were so high on those towers, only that area of the steel would have been compromised or weakened. And that's if you had way more jet fuel in a much different scenario. This jet fuel, that explosion that you saw, according to the official narrative, of course, that explosion that you saw, that was the jet fuel burning. This jet fuel wasn't poured. It's not like you took all the jet fuel that was in the jet and specifically put it on the steel columns. That's not realistic. Some of it probably hit the steel columns, but was it enough to cause an enormous building, two buildings, to collapse? No. No. And certainly not melt the steel. Now, in the beginning of the video that we just watched, you saw molten steel coming out of the floors where the impact occurred. What the hell could that be? What burns so hot to melt steel? 2,500 degrees or more. It's not jet fuel. And there's nothing else within the aircraft or within the building that would create such high temperatures. Steel melts between 2,500 and 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on its carbon content and allowing elements. Generally, higher common carbon content lowers the melting point, while stainless steel typically melts between 2,500 and 2,785 degrees Fahrenheit. Carbon steel, 25 to 28. Stainless steel, 25 to 27,850. Mild steel, 2462. High carbon steel, 2800. Pure iron, 2800. Very high quality steel was used in the construction of the Twin Towers, as well as Building 7. So these melting points that you see starting at 2500 and going up, the up would be the key word there in terms of how high of a temperature you need to actually melt the steel that was within the Twin Towers. It was not jet fuel. It's impossible for the molten metals that we see to be caused by jet fuel. And there's nothing else within the plane or within the building that could possibly cause steel to melt. And we're not just talking about a small amount of steel. We're talking about an enormous amount of steel. For example, this is a heat map of New York City, of Manhattan, where the towers were collapsed. The image to the left shows the hot spots. And then you have two other images as well. This image shows a zoomed out version of exactly what I just said. You can see where it says G, H, F, E, C, D. And of course, over there at A and B, those are molten spots of metal, like lava. You heard the firefighter say it. It was a river of lava. And the overhead map after 9/11 shows exactly what he was talking about. That is molten steel. This is all that was left at the bottom of the World Trade Center. Where are all of the steel columns that held this building in place? Oh, there they are. There they are. Those big orange spots that you see on your screen. There's your steel columns. Melted. Completely melted. And again, what could possibly reach those temperatures? Because we know it's not this. So there's nothing else. Or was there? Next video.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle.
I started looking at the molten metal. All three buildings, both towers in the rubble, in the basement areas, and building 7, there's these pools of molten metal.
Get down below and you'd see molten steel. Molten steel.
Rumble Cloud, your freedom, our promise. Break free from big tech's grip with a cloud service that champions your right to innovate. No vendor lock-in.
Steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry. Like lava. Okay.
The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found underneath World Trade Center 7.
So I'm looking through the official reports. What do they say about the molten metal? They say nothing. Now, wait a minute. This is important evidence. So where'd that come from?
Thermite is so hot that it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter.
The products are molten iron and aluminum oxide, which goes off primarily as a dust. You know those enormous dust clouds? You can imagine when you assemble these chemicals on a large scale.
Many parts of that video I want to focus on, but the very first one is this. That is one of the metal columns that we keep referring to. And we keep referring to them because many of these large steel columns supported the World Trade Center. Numerous metal columns that day before they very quickly knocked them down and got rid of them. Numerous metal columns were cut diagonally. And as you could see in that yellow circled metal column, the edge of it has molten steel, which has now hardened, but you have melted steel coming out and pouring down the side of this diagonally cut column. The steel could not have melted. But yet we see molten steel everywhere. Take a look at what the compound known as thermite could do to a heavy steel structure, such as a car engine.
All right, this is the little Suzuki Jimny engine from the water test. And this is about 2 kilos of thermite.
Hold on, I gotta stop it. Because this Yahoo over here says, in the live chat, he says, if the floors are falling, there is plenty of heat. 2,500 degrees worth of heat? Because let's just not use words like plenty, because that's not a number, right? Steel and iron and any metal melts at a certain temperature. So you can't say plenty and then call that a melting point. I promise you, there's no melting point for any metal that is plenty. It's a number. So if what you're saying is true and the floors falling are generating heat, how much heat do the floors falling generate? Is it 2,500 degrees? So now you're telling me that floors falling, which is friction, right? It's just, my hands are hot right now too. Not 2,500 degrees hot. You know how you can make a fire? With the sticks. Like they do in the shows, in the reality shows. Make a fire with the sticks. That's friction too. What you're talking about is friction heat. Boom, 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 boom. Another question for you. in the controlled demolition video that I just showed, we saw plenty of floors falling on each other, but we didn't see any molten steel. Why? Because by your plenty melting point, we should have seen massive fire because of all the controlled demolition successive collapses. So plenty of heat. Whoa, what a mysterious number that is. It's so mysterious that there is no number. Oh, same guy now says, trust me, the dinosaurs know about the pressure of the sediment. Jesus, please. Why? Oh, now he says, good point in the demolition. Yeah, no, I know. I think I know a thing or two about this. I really do. I wouldn't go live in front of millions of people and make myself look like an idiot saying things that I didn't already know to be true. I'm here to educate you. I'm not here to guess about my content, whether or not it's right or wrong. I'm here to try to inform you of what I know so that you could know. But when you say whacked out things like the sediment pressure from the dinosaurs, bro, there were no dinosaurs. I don't know what show you're watching, maybe for the first time. Thank you for coming, by the way. But boy, you got a lot to learn. There's no dinosaurs. Poor soul. You need to stay on my show often, but stop commenting as much until you're more educated, because plenty of heat from the floor. Plenty. The melting point is plenty. That's our target. The melting point of steel is plenty. How'd you do today, Phil? Plenty. You had a good day then? Yeah, plenty. Hey, sir, how many ounces of steak do you want tonight with your dinner? Plenty, please. What's your phone number? Plenty. You can't say plenty when we're talking about melting points. I know you're not a scientist, nor am I, nor would I ever want to be, but like follow here a little bit. Like, you know what I mean? Because when we're talking about melting point of jet fuel, we're talking about it for a reason, because that is a very high melting point. I'm sorry, burning temperature point that steel melts at, and burning point of jet fuel, how hot the jet fuel could get. Those are very scientific numbers that have to be calculated precisely in order to get massive buildings, skyscrapers, in one of the most recognizable cities in the world, New York City, to fall in a nice little pile. How old are you, Phil? Plenty. Oh, not plenty, not so plenty. Less plenty. There we go, we got a new one now. Less plenty. Plenty. Lord in heaven. Back to the engine block with thermite.
Alright, this is the little Suzuki Jimny engine from the water test. And this is about 2 kilos of thermite. Engine block versus thermite.
Now you see why you needed your sunglasses? Yeah. Don't touch it though, it's really hot.
No.
That is very, very, very hot. That's what 2 kilos of thermite does to an engine block.
That was awesome.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't breathe the fumes in.
Whoa. Still. Would that be hot for... Wait, was that your coffee table?
No, it's an old engine block.
Oh.
That's a couple of 1,000 degrees C, that was. Pretty hot.
I have to keep moving.
A couple of things to notice in the video: the bright burning color, which was that yellow orangish color, is the same color seen here.
Pouring out of the South Tower just minutes before its collapse, molten metal by any standard. The official story tells us that this must be molten aluminum from the melted airplane. But molten aluminum looks like molten aluminum. It's silvery, does not glow.
Molten aluminum is a silver color, which very clearly is much different. And you don't have to take just that video's word for it. You could look up what molten aluminum looks like versus molten steel. And very much like the engine that we just saw, molten steel is an orangey, bright.
Rumble Studio is the answer to everything. We have a show on the hour every hour. And we started using Rumble Studio as our central production hub.
Glowing color. We had firsthand witnesses, the firefighters that we saw earlier tonight, talk about how they witnessed molten steel running like a foundry, they said, their words. The only way to melt steel that day would have been thermite. In the very beginning of that engine video, he showed you a bucket full of about 2 kilos of thermite, very small amount of thermite. That 2 kilos just melted through that engine block in a very short period of time, I might add. Now, the time that the towers had to melt their steel was about 40 minutes, I believe, from the time that the first explosion occurred to the time that the very first tower fell. Plenty of time to melt. So, how? So now we know, number one, no planes. Massive explosions. Number two, thermite. Thermite is the culprit for all of the molten steel that we saw that day. But how on earth, you saw what 2 kilos of thermite looks like, right? How on earth do you get a massive amount, hundreds of thousands of kilos of thermite into the World Trade Center? Keep in mind, people work in this building. International people work in this building. Houses some of the most important agencies in the world. How do you just sneak past all of this thermite? And where do you put it? Because it's not, you can't just bring it into the building and leave it in the corner of an office and be like, all right, thermite, you got plenty of work to do. You got it. Like, that's just, it'll just burn right. The thermite will burn right there. But that just because it's in the building doesn't guarantee that it's going to cause any kind of effect, especially not the effect that was intended for that day, which was to control demolition, the Twin Towers, as well as Building 7. So now we have 2 problems that we need to address. Number one, how the hell do you get it in there unnoticed? And number 2, how do you get it on the steel, which is required in order for the towers to fall, which is the ultimate goal for the day? Through a little bit of research and a lot of digging, you will find the answers that you seek.
Nanothermite. It also turns out that molten metal exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit was discovered in the rubble of Ground Zero, underneath the Twin Towers and Building 7. Firefighters, emergency workers, police, officials, even Rudy Giuliani testified to these massive temperatures. Even after heavy rain on September 14th and 21st, a constant stream of fire retardants and water described as creating a giant lake. These fires were not put out until December 13th, 2001, making it the longest burning structural fire in history. I know what you're thinking. If explosives or incendiaries were in the building, how would they get in there without anyone noticing? A December 2000 assessment of the World Trade Center recommended immediate renovation work on the steel columns contained within elevator shafts of both Twin Towers. Turner Construction, a company located on the 38th floor of the North Tower, was selected to do the job. Turner's CEO at the time was Tom Leppert, who had personal ties to George W. Bush and Carlos Gutierrez, Secretary of the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce is in charge of NIST, an agency that may sound familiar. Turner Construction also did fireproofing work on the very floors that were struck by Flights 11 and 175. Of course, all documents pertaining to Turner's work on the Twin Towers were destroyed on 9/11. In addition, President Bush's brother, Marvin, was on the board of directors at Securicom from 1993 until fiscal year 2000. Securicom, later known as Stratasec, was an electronic security company backed by Kuwait American Corporation, which provided security for United Airlines, Dulles International Airport, and from the early 1990s up to 9/11, the World Trade Center. According to the Port Authority, There are no records pertaining to the work that the company performed on the World Trade Center. So, a company with ties to the government agency that eventually investigated the collapse was responsible for doing renovation work inside the Twin Towers, and the building's security was run by a company with family ties to President Bush. And we have no records to prove what they did inside the buildings. Nothing suspicious here. If only we could have examined the steel from the World Trade Center. Unfortunately, the debris was almost immediately shipped overseas, being sold to the lowest bidder. This is destruction and removal of evidence from a crime scene. Family members and engineers were outraged at the decision and demanded that the steel be preserved for investigation. Bill Manning of Fire Engineering magazine publicly labeled the cleanup at Ground Zero a half-baked farce. Yet the operation continued until the site was officially clear on May 30th, 2000.
How do you get thermite into the building? Well, President's brother is on the board of a company that does fireproofing for commercial projects. Why don't we just say that, hey, and this was a month before, by the way, this was in August of 2001. Why don't we just say that there are emergency repairs needed in the elevator shafts of the Twin Towers? Pretty easy to pay somebody to do that report. I can pay somebody tomorrow to say that my house is in need of emergency repairs. I could pay them probably $10,000 for that. Very small amount of money. Very small amount of money would be needed to generate a fake report itemizing the emergency repairs that are needed on the World Trade Center. So whoever it was paid to and whoever paid it got it done. Report was generated. And immediately they already had a company lined up who, by the way, was on the 38th floor of one of the towers. Of course, that company had the president's brother on the board, as well as the transportation secretary. Look into him a little bit. You'll see a lot more of his dirty little deeds. They shut down the building. Bomb-sniffing dogs were removed. A couple days before, a few days before September 11th. The elevator shafts, which have, by the way, open access to all of the steel beams in the building, they were covered in thermite. Massive, massive amounts of thermite, and also laced with explosives. Doesn't take much of an ignition, as you saw from the engine block video. Doesn't take much of an ignition to start thermite burning. A very small ignition will do it. So a couple strategically placed bombs with remote detonators could very easily get that done. Once the thermite was ignited, the other massive bombs were triggered. And in just a very short period of time, the buildings fell. Why? Because the entire building was laced with thermite from inside the elevator shafts. Some of the steel columns were even cut diagonally, like the one that we saw, to ensure that the building would fall into itself and not over. That's why you needed to diagonally cut those beams, because if you just put thermite going all the way down the beam, and that's why in this picture, you can even see, let me pull it up here. In this photo, you could even see that they didn't go all the way down to the ground. Keep in mind, underneath this steel beam is a pile of rubble and molten steel and dust and all sorts of other things. So at this level, someone made a decision that architecturally and according to engineer standards, this point is what needed to be cut at to ensure that the building collapses on itself and not off in other directions. That's why you had those nice little neat piles right there, kind of like a controlled demolition. Why? Because it was a controlled demolition. I'll show you one more photo. This is a photo of nanothermite. Nanothermite is a military grade thermite. It is extremely potent, much more potent than the regular thermite that we've seen on the engine block and referenced in a couple other areas.
Rumble Studio is a game changer for our show. Rumble Studio lets us stream to Rumble and all the other platforms while consolidating the viewers into Rumble.
Military grade thermite is much, much more potent, burns much hotter and much faster. These little specks of termite, listen to me, these little specks of nanothermite were found in ground zero. September 11, 2001 was a psychological attack on America and on the world. It was done to make you feel unsafe. It was done to make you trust government. It was done to destabilize the Middle East and put the Middle East in Israel's control. It was also done to get you to comply, just like COVID was, absolutely no different. It all had to do with Agenda 2020, at which time we would have lost our lives as we know them. Most of us, probably just about all of us that are here right now, watching this right now, would have ended up in jail or dead. They almost had us. Interestingly enough, and we'll talk more about this, on the morning of 9/11, 2001 at 10 a.m., Alan Greenspan, who was the head of the Federal Reserve at the time, had called for an emergency public press conference. The first time the Fed has ever called for such a thing in the history of the Fed. That was scheduled for 10 a.m. on September 11th. 3 days prior to September 11th, Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense at the time, had just announced that the Pentagon has lost, don't know where it is, we don't know where it is, $3 trillion. Lost. Trillion with a T, not million with an M, not billion with a B. $999 billion times 3. And that was in 2001. Do you know how easy it would have been to conduct this operation if you had a $3 trillion war chest? What about the people on the planes? You know how easy it would have been to convince them to fake their death? Who was on the planes? Did you ever look at that manifest? I have. And the manifest is what we will talk about in, as well as the Pentagon in part 3. Cliffhanger. Love those cliffhangers. When will it be? Plenty. I think that's as good a time as any. You know what I mean? Plenty. So I'll see you on Plenty. Probably around Plenty o'clock. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to give specifics. I'm just going to say Plenty. Part 3. I'm sorry, I said $3 trillion, but yes, it was $21 trillion. Somebody just corrected me in the chat. Thank you, by the way. $21 trillion gone. So we're going to do Monday night. Tomorrow, I have some stuff going on, but Monday night we're going to do probably 7 p.m., a little bit earlier. Right now, I want to encourage everyone to go over to the Adam